Yeah, they should cook there.
Give me.
Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Nami Govinda Radhe Radha Govinda Radha Govinda Radhe Radha Govinda Radha Govinda
What 22nd Avenue is to New York City and the ISKCON movement, this little ancient farmhouse is to New Vrindavan. This is where it all began. Srila Prabhupada wanted, from the very beginning of his dream for the Krishna consciousness mission, a place of pilgrimage to reveal Lord Krishna's pastimes in the Western world. You know the story of Prabhupada sitting on that park bench in Central Park, telling a man that he had so many temples and farm communities, so many books were being published in schools. At that time he was alone living in the Bowery. He didn't even have the storefront of 22nd Avenue. But he had a vision that was inaugurated by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Lord Nityananda Prabhu. That the holy name of Krishna be distributed in every town and village in this world. And Srila Bhakti Vinod Thakur, he also had this vision. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, at the first meeting with Srila Prabhupada at 1 Ultadanga Junction Road, planted the seed of the mission of Krishna consciousness. He told him that you are an intelligent young man. You should spread this message of Lord Chaitanya all over the world. At the age of 70, Srila Prabhupada arrived in New York City in 1965. And he started very simple, with practically no help. Some well-wishers, not even really committed devotees, just well-wishers, told him they would help him by paying the first month's rent. That was after he was kicked out, almost violently, of the previous place he was staying, and he had nowhere to go. But they said they wouldn't be able to pay the next month's rent. So Prabhupada began like that after about a year of struggling in the Bowery, trying to somehow or other give devotees, the previous acharyas, the satisfaction of seeing their dream fulfilled. Prabhupada said many times he would go to the docks with the Jaladuta. He had a return ticket, and he was thinking he should come back because nothing was happening. Everything seemed to be failing. He wrote to his godbrothers and well-wishers in America, I'm here. It's our Guru's order. Send some devotees to help me. sent some funds, sent something, but nothing came. After repeated letters of request, he finally got a mridanga, some kartals. Previous to that, he was playing some American drums, little simple bongo drum. So Prabhupada demonstrated how a devotee with faith and determination carries on his service under any circumstance, completely depending on Krishna to be the reciprocator of his love. And what results come? Prabhupada said, if one person becomes Krishna conscious, through all of this effort of the Hare Krishna movement, mission is a success. But the compassion of a great Vaishnava it breaks his heart to see any one single person left in this world without Krishna consciousness, because that is the state of real suffering. Srila Prabhupada left Vrindavan in 1965. But actually, he didn't leave Vrindavan. He carried Vrindavan in his heart. He wanted to reveal Vrindavan to the world. And in each and every temple, he wanted Sri Sri Radha Krishna Vrindavan to attract the hearts of all the conditioned souls. New Vrindavan had a very, very special, significant place in his mission, because it was here that he wanted culture, the mood and the lifestyle of Vrindavan to be established in the West. He wanted replicas of the six Goswamis' temples and the forests and the holy places of Vrindavan to be constructed here. Just as millions of people go to Vrindavan in India every year on pilgrimage to associate with Vaishnavas and to be spiritually rejuvenated by hearing and chanting the glories, the names of the Lord. He wanted New Vrindavan to serve that same function. How was it found in West Virginia? Kirtanananda Swami and Hayagriva, they wanted to start a little farm community. They were not thinking in terms of New Vrindavan or anything like that. They just wanted to start a little farm community because they knew Prabhupada wanted that, teaching cow protection. Agriculture. They had no money. In the San Francisco Oracle, which was a newspaper for the revolutionary-minded youths of the time, they saw they bought 100 acres of land that was on lease in the hills of West Virginia for practically nothing. So they felt this was the only property in the whole country that they could afford, so they came here. And it was a great struggle, but somehow or other, they got a 99-year lease for $99. And in the contract it is said, after the 99 years, if you pay $1, then you own the property. Binding contract. So they came up here. The road that you walked was not the road. This is like an interstate highway compared to the road there was up until just a few years ago. This road was personally carved in the mountains by Bharasana Maharaj, His Holiness. Tremendous work. But previously, there was just a mud path that went way down a very different direction than this road to Bulaban. And that mud path was very, very well known as Agasura. because it devoured anyone who went upon it, especially any vehicles. At that time, this section of the house was not there. This was a modern addition from the pillar on. It was over 100-year-old farmhouse, dilapidated, holes in the walls. It was an old, dilapidated barn that has been torn down in recent years. And it was the middle of the wilderness. You had to walk 3 miles up a mud road. And 2 streams went by that mud road that you'd have to cross across, that you'd have to somehow go across. In the winter, it was usually solid ice, 3 miles of solid ice, going up and down hills. And in the summer, it was very famous throughout the Hare Krishna movement for being approximately knee-deep with mud. Not ordinary mud, but New Vrindavan mud. That means when you put your foot in it, your foot becomes the property of New Vrindavan. And only with great effort can you reclaim it. Well, they came up here, and it was very simple. And they invited Srila Prabhupada to come. I believe it was 1969, Srila Prabhupada came here. And actually, even his car got stuck. They had to leave it, and the devotees had to walk. And when Prabhupada came here, there was really nothing here. It was a jungle, completely isolated from civilization. 3 miles from an old beat-up country road, which has later been renovated. But Srila Prabhupada saw a holy place that would attract people from all over America to Krishna in this little unknown, desolate farmhouse that we're sitting today. Prabhupada officially named this place New Vrindavan. The house that we're staying, he would give his classes every day in this temple room. Upstairs was where he would rest. It was divided in half. Half was his bedroom, half was where he would translate Srimad Bhagavatam. In the back was a persimmon tree. For hours and hours a day, he would sit under that persimmon tree and work on his translations and speak to devotees who would sit in the grass and the weeds and at his lotus feet. He would tell them the vision of how to develop New Vrindavan. He was telling them how to move mountains, how to build bridges across valleys. He told them about the necessity of cow protection and how to actually conduct it in the Western world. He revealed the vision of the 7 temples, 7 hills and valleys, to reveal the true glories of Braja. But most of all, he wanted to establish the principle of simple living and high thinking. He was very much discouraging any type of modern technology here. Although in the city temples, he encouraged very much any type of technology to spread Krishna consciousness. But he wanted a model of real Vrindavan Vedic culture here. Work the oxens, try to avoid tractors, plant your own food, have no necessity to go to the town or anywhere else. Be self-sufficient. With the milk of the cows, you could make ghee, you could make sweets, you could make cheese, curd. With the dung, you can fertilize the fields. With the oxen, you plow the fields. And you can grow grains, vegetables, fruits, flowers. And you live happily and keep Krishna in the center of everything. When many, many technical questions were asked about how to develop New Vrindavan, at one time Prabhupada said, you just chant Hare Krishna. Well, the first day I came up, one devotee actually named Devada, he was putting hay on a wagon with a horse to drive it up here for the few cows that were up here. And he told me it's an order that you have to help me put the hay on the wagon and then come up because you're not allowed to stay anywhere else. You go up and don't come down. So I was put up here. And there was about 5 devotees living. I remember the first service I was asked to do was to pull weeds out of the strawberry patch right below the house, just about a 5-second walk from where we are. And I was thinking, pulling weeds? That's murder. Because the way I was trained in India is you cannot kill any living being. So I said, this is murder, killing weeds. I'll cut them, but I will not pull them out from the roots. And the devotees said to me, you must kill them. And then they started preaching to me about Bhagavad Gita. How Arjuna was told to kill his own grandfather, his own teacher, his own cousin brothers, his own friends. Because it was the order of Krishna, he had to kill them. So you are being ordered by Krishna to kill these weeds. I surrendered. But what I would do is I would put my mouth to the ground, right at when I was thinking, the ear of the weed, and I would say the Maha Mantra, and then pull it. Hoping that he would get a higher birth. So I did that for some time. Then a few days later, that same devotee gave me a double-barrel shotgun. He told me there's a cornfield down here, and the groundhogs are eating the corn. Your full-time service is to sit on this hill, look down at the cornfield, and shoot and kill any groundhog that comes. Then they taught me how to shoot the shotgun. So what happened is, the person who was saying this he was living in Bahulaban. He would just come up, give orders, and come down. So what I would do is I would sit on that hill, and I knew if any corn was eaten by the groundhogs, I was in big trouble. And the groundhogs would come, and I would see them, and they'd look at me. And I'd look at them, and I had the shotgun in my hand, but I just couldn't do it. I was trying to meditate on Arjuna. And I realized I just wasn't Arjuna. So I just started yelling at the groundhog and chasing them. I would just, every time they'd come, I just chased them away. So weeks went by and no corn was touched. And I never pulled the trigger of that shotgun. three cows up here, Kalia, Dudya, and Basya. And Kalia was the original cow of New Vrindavan. She was just a little black cow with some white spots, and she only had one eye. She was an old cow when she was bought, because she was very small and she was very inexpensive. But she was like the queen. She was so majestic. Every year, for about 10 years, she gave a calf every year and gave so much milk to the deities. So I was milking these cows. And then there was the great service of preparing for Prabhupada's arrival. He was going to stay at Madhuban, which is down the mountain, across the little river, up another mountain, and then across. The house is again across the street from where Sankirtan lives now. It has been torn down. And that house was so old and so dilapidated. There was a question asked, does anybody here know how to paint? So I said, when I was a little boy, I once helped my father paint the walls in our house. So they said, oh, then you're in charge of painting the house. So, first they gave me this little knife and told me, first you have to scrape all the peeling paint off the house before you can start painting the inside and the outside. So we just started trying to paint for Prabhupada's house. And then I'd come out from Mangal Arati here, and there was 6 people living in this ashram. Hayagriva and his wife and son, Adipati, and Murari Gupta and one other devotee. And there was a place called the Pig Pen, because previously it was the place that the old farmers kept their pigs. I stayed in the pig pen. I considered it a very nice budget kutir. Because compared to what I was living in India, this was so opulent. It actually had walls. Then after the morning program, we would milk the cows and go down the mountain, up the mountain, paint the house, come back down, climb the mountains again. And there was no paths. You'd have to just hold on to vines and trees to keep from falling as you go up and down the mountains. Just through the very thick jungle. Then come back and milk the cows. That morning, evening program. Just a few devotees. It was very sweet. Then Srila Prabhupada came, and he gave classes every day at Bahulaban. We built a beautiful pavilion on the top of a mountain. And there Prabhupada celebrated his Vyasa Puja. The new addition to the old farmhouse of Bahulaban was completed right on Janmashtami night. Prabhupada inaugurated the deities moving to their new temple. Prabhupada gave initiations. It was a glorious festival. It was the biggest festival of the time up until that date in the Western world. Devotees from all over America came to celebrate Janmashtami and Vyasa Puja in the personal association of Srila Prabhupada. I was planning to return to India after Prabhupada left. But then I was thinking, why do I have all my own independent desires? I should serve where Prabhupada wants me to serve, not where I want to serve. I really didn't like New Vrindavan at all. I loved Vrindavan. Because I was thinking the people here are really rough. And Vrindavan is so sweet. So I prayed to Radha Vrindavan Chandra. Prabhupada was leaving to go to the Syrian mosque in Pittsburgh to give lecture. And I prayed to Radha Vrindavan Chandra, where do you want me, here or there? And Srila Prabhupada indicated to me that I should stay here in New Vrindavan. So then I decided I will just stay on. So I lived up here. I was chanting 64 rounds a day, carrying out from Vrindavan, back down in the little pig pen. And milking the cows and reading Prabhupada's books hours and hours a day. It was like simple Babaji life. And then I was given the service of working in oxen. There was an oxen named Brisham. He was so stubborn that the only work he would do was sleep. As soon as you connected anything to him, he would just lay down and go to sleep. So people working the oxen at Boulavan were very frustrated. They would try to do everything according to the books to get him to work, but he would just sleep. So they brought him up here, and they told me that this was their gift. That they gave me a little axe and brisham and a rope, and told me, you go into the forest, you look for dead trees, and you cut them down, then you tie them to the back of brisham and bring them in, and then chop them up, because the only way there was for cooking was with wood. And that's how the deities will be given their offerings. There's no gas or electricity like what would be used for heating or cooking in those days. So I would cut down the tree with this little axe, and it would fall. I didn't know how to cut trees. I was always wondering which way it would fall. So I would be chanting very intensely when I would be cutting down the trees. And then I'd tie it to Brisham, and he would go to sleep. Just these forests back here. Now everything has been changed around to a large degree. They cut down many of the forests and push them back. Just back there. So what I would do is I would chop the pieces of wood into very small pieces so they wouldn't be so heavy for Brisham. And I just couldn't carry them in because they were logs and we needed so much for cooking. So I just started to preach to Brisham. Because I already knew that hitting him didn't work. The more you hit him, the sounder he would sleep. Everybody else failed, so I just would sit in front of him and have kirtan for him. And then preach to him. And sometimes I was just so desperate because I needed his help that he actually felt sorry for me. I could see he would look at me like I was really in a sorrowful state. And he would get up and pull the wood. So we became very good friends. So this went on for some months. One day I was upstairs looking down through the window and I saw a wagon with horses. And the wagon had a mountain of sleeping bags and other types of belongings on it. And behind the wagon was 20 brahmatrinis, or unmarried women. The leaders of the community decided that this would be the Brahmacharini ashram. And immediately when they came up, I thought that I should go down to Bahulavan. That's where all the brahmacharis were staying. So I sent a message down, and I said, please relieve me of my service up here so I can come down and live in the brahmachari ashram. And the message came back, that you're the only one up there who knows how to milk cows, so you have to stay. Hare Krishna. So there were 2 grihastha couples, 20 unmarried women, and I was the only brahmachari. And when there was arti, I would stand right in front of the deities to the side, so I didn't look back for a second. And as soon as the morning program was over, I would go right down to my bhajan kutir, and I would get up around 1 in the morning to chant 64 rounds, so I have the spiritual strength to come to the morning program. Once a week I got to bring Brisham down to Bahulavan to pick up the grains for the cows, because the cows that are giving milk need certain types of grains. I put it on Brishan's back and then walk him up. And every time I'd go down, the brahmacharis would chastise me. What are you doing up there with all those women? I'd say, I don't want to be there. I begged, but I'm told I have to be up there to milk the cow. And they would say, it's all based on your desire. Those were the days of surrender. You really gave up all independence when you came to the Hare Krishna movement. So that went on for some months. I would regularly send messages down if I could come down, and they said, you could come down when you train somebody else to milk the cows. So these young unmarried ladies would come into the barn and say, you can train me to milk the cows. And I said, no, I only milk cows alone. That's my vow, to only milk cows alone. So to be honest with you, my only brahmachari association was Brisham. He was oxen. That's no problem for him. So we used to go out into the forest, and I would just have nice satsang with Brisham. Cutting down trees. And one day I brought the oxen, I brought Brisham down to pick up grains, and I was told by the leader, what are you doing up there with all those women? I said, that's what I'm asking. He said, come, you could come down. So I came down and joined the brahmachari ashram there. And there, my first service was working horses. And because I wasn't very good at that, they were huge horses, gigantic horses, about 5 times my size, 10 times my size. Big European working horses. I tried, but sometimes they would bite me when I would tell them to do something. So they realized I wasn't very good for horses. So they had me digging ditches. For some months I was just digging ditches in the mud. And then, because I knew how to milk cows, they gave me the full-time service of taking care of cows. There was about 25 cows milking down there at that time. So 4 of us would milk all the cows every morning and every evening. was a wonderful year. Then in January of 1974, it was decided the brahmacharis would live here. So the brahmatrinis all moved to Madhuban, which was that house across the valley. And the brahmacharis moved up here. And it was very austere. We moved up here in the middle of the winter. Param Brahma Prabhu, my dear, dear godbrother, who just left his body just a few months ago, he was the temple president. And I was in charge of the cows. Gargarishi was in charge of cooking. And one devotee, I think Soma, was in charge of the deity worship. So it was just a matter of days or weeks, because it was very, very austere here, that the pujari and the cook got married. Hare Krishna. Somehow they left. So I was asked to be the pujari. The deities here were Radha Vrindavan Nath. They were installed in June of 1973. At that time, the altar was here. And the way the schedule was, later in 74, one devotee named Gosta Bihari and Jita Brata, they built this altar here. They actually carved this marble altar. And we moved the deities there. It was a grand festival. Everyone from the community came to see the deities moved. So the life was that the brahmacharis were the workforce for New Vrindavan. Every morning, Mangal Arati would be at 4 o'clock, and you had to have all your rounds done before Mangal Arati, because there was no such thing as a japa period. In fact, the devotees of New Vrindavan used to make fun of other ISKCON temples that had japa periods after Mangal Arati. We used to consider that a life of sense gratification. Plus, they had Mangal Arati at 4:30. So we'd get up. I had to get all my rounds done before waking the deities at 3:30. Because there was no time in the day to chant even one round. It was impossible. It was so busy. So I think I used to get up at 1 o'clock every morning. And because I was the first one up in the winter, I was the first one to face the bathhouse. Hare Krishna. The bathhouse was downstairs, I'll show you. It's been renovated since then, and it was a dreary dungeon-looking like place. And the first thing you did when you woke up was offer your obeisances, and then go just outside the bathhouse was the shovel. Little shovel from the Vietnam War. Made by the US Army. It was actually for digging ditches so that you could duck down from soldiers shooting at you. And there was a little can. It was an empty can from US government ration peanut butter. And we would climb down the mountain, snow and ice, and then somehow dig a hole. And then we would respond to nature's calls. And I remember in January, everyone, it's just one at a time, people would go down there, and there would be massive, freezing cold winds. And blizzard snow would be falling on you, and you'd just be down there. You'd really realize that you were an insignificant jivatma. you couldn't wear any clothes except kopans, because you didn't want to contaminate any other of your clothes. That was the standard. We do it in our kopans with nothing else in the winter. Later on, we found the only place we would have any place to get clothes was there was a bin, just like a big old box in the barn of the clothes that were left by the previous families that lived in this house before the devotees came. It was all covered with mildew, and in the winter it would be covered with ice, and we used to just chip through there and find some old coats or something. So they found an old U.S. Navy jacket, and that became the official stool jacket. Hang it right in the inside of the bathhouse. And every devotee in the morning, because we were only allowed to pass stool in the morning. After that, I wasn't bona fide. We had to do it before Mangalarti. And we'd take turns one at a time. We'd put on the stool jacket. Climb down the mountain, freezing cold, trembling, and just trying to dig a hole. And you had to dig the hole because it was a capital offense to leave stool in the open. You had to dig a nice hole and cover it. It was considered an offense to the deity. We'd be down there, and we'd get up and give the stool jacket to 25 brahmacharis used that same jacket to pass stool in. And in 8 years, it was never washed. And it was filthy and full of mildew and everything else when we first found it. Hare Krishna. I wish I could find that stool jacket. It would be a very valuable, priceless item, relic of New Vrindavan's history. Then after that, because I was the first one for baths, at least there was 1 gallon jugs. It was a 1 gallon jug that we pour with, and we had to use at least 3 jugs to be bona fide clean. 3 gallons of water. It was as colder than ice. And in those days, I never had a gumsha or a towel, so I would just wipe the water with my hands and then run upstairs and put on the old dhotis and chadars we had and then wake the deities. And there was Mangalarti. No, not wake the deities. I would come up and chant japa. I would come up and chant japa and had to get all my 16 rounds done before waking the deities. And the brahmacharis, they'd get up around 2 o'clock every morning, every one of them. They would go down, and sometimes there'd be some wood, so they would start a fire down there so it wouldn't be so cold. But that was after my... And they would all come up, and we'd all be here chanting japa. There was a stove here, a wood stove. But in the winter, the wood was usually always wet. And these windows, these are new windows. Things are pretty new in here now. They were very... When the winds would come, the winds would just come right through the cracks of the windows. So we'd have to take plastic and hammer plastic all around the windows from the outside, so no air could get in. But it was still freezing cold. And sometimes during japa they would start a little fire here, and there would be so much smoke, that it was unbearable. And you can't go outside because it was all covered with snow. So we had a choice of either choking in the smoke with our eyes burning or freezing. So devotees would go back and forth. They'd break the plastic off the window and open the window and stick their head out and come in. And finally we just decided, forget this wood. And no one could sit down to chant japa because the floor was like ice. Devotees would just walk back and forth, try to keep their feet off the floor as much as possible. And there was one, from the center of the ceiling, there was one light bulb that was hanging from a wire that would light up the whole room. And the devotees used to gather around that light bulb and chant their japa, trying to get some heat from it. And the greatest sense gratification of the whole day was when the ghee lamp came by. I'm not exaggerating. Devotees would hold their hands over that ghee lamp as long as they possibly could before someone else would come. And the prasad was very, very austere. It was just some oat water and rice. It was a very simple life, very wonderful life. The brahmacharis worked so hard, and they had such love and attraction for the deities here. They would just be longing all day to return. And when they would come up for the evening arti, you cannot even imagine what an incredibly wonderful kirtan it would be. Everyone would just be jubilant to be back with Radha Vrindavan, dancing and dancing. The only thing happening here was deity worship. There was nothing else. Kirtanananda Swami once came up here. Actually, one time he took me to New York. We went to New York together to visit with Srila Prabhupada and went on morning walks with Prabhupada. But then Prabhupada then said that the first class pujari never leaves his deities. So I was told, when you go up there, you never come down for the rest of your life. And they drew a line right outside in the road and said, you never cross this line. You die on this side of the line. Hare Krishna. So I stayed up. There's many wonderful stories. There was no phone up here. It was totally isolated. My father was always worried about me. He'd make phone calls to here and ask, can I talk to my son? They said, no, where he lives there's no phone. Well, how can I talk to him? You have to go there. I asked Advaitacharya the story. He came to Bahulavan, flew from Chicago to Pittsburgh, rented a car and came here. And he's a businessman from Chicago. He used to drive a Cadillac. And when he got here, they told him, if you want to see your son, he's not allowed to come down from the mountain for the rest of his life. It's impossible for an old man like you to walk that road. It's too rugged with ice and mud. So they gave him a ride on the back of a hay wagon with horses. And they dropped him off here. And it was just at the end of autumn. There was no leaves on the trees. It was cold, it was rainy. There was no one here except me. He came in, I was offering arti to the deities. He couldn't figure out what was happening. So I showed him around. I showed him the deities, that's showing him around. He said, where do you sleep? I took him in the back to the pujari room and showed him the little wooden floor I slept on. I offered him prasad. We had no chairs here. We had no spoons or forks here. All the prasad was cold. He was bewildered how he was supposed to eat it. But the biggest problem was when he told me, I have to use your toilet. He said, we don't use toilets.
Stool jacket.
What do you use? So I brought him and showed him the little shovel, and I said, you have to climb down the mountain and then dig a hole. Make sure you cover it. He said, I'll just hold it till I get back to I'll just hold it till I get back to the Pittsburgh airport. So he was up here all day, and then the horse wagon, on the way up, because the road was so bad that the hay wagon broke down in the middle of the road. So the only other wagon to come and pick my father up was the horse manure wagon. That's where all the horse stool was put in the wagon and then taken out, and with shovels they put it in the fields for fertilizer. So they tried to shovel as much of the horse stool out. They didn't wash it or anything, it just with the shovel they just took most of it out and then put some hay on top of it so he could sit. So I remember he asked me, at one time he said, what do you do here? And I showed him the deities out of Vrindavan. I was totally happy here just to see the deities. They were so resplendent with beauty. It was the only nice looking thing here in the winter was the deities. Everything else was desolate and gray. The deities were shining. All attractive. I told him I worship these deities. He started to cry. He said, you mean I gave my whole life to raise you? And in the end, you've dedicated your life to playing with dolls? I said, they're not dolls. This is the Supreme Lord. He didn't argue, but it was very difficult for an American businessman to understand these esoteric truths. Well, he got on the horse manure with a Advaitacharya in the front. He felt terrible that he had to pick up this aristocratic businessman in a horse manure wagon and make him go up and down that bumpy road, and it was raining out. He didn't have an umbrella. We got an old dirty piece of plastic to put over him, trying to keep him warm. Dry. He looked, I said, I'm sorry that I couldn't have given more to you while you were up here. And he just looked around and said, son, what could you have given me? There's nothing here. And then he went down. So we lived our life up here. My schedule was, I would wake up at 1 in the morning, take bath, chant 16 rounds at least, and wake the deities, and do the offering for Mangalarti, and usually I would offer Mangalarti, but sometimes other people, because they were here, would offer Mangalarti. We would lead kirtans. Then after greeting the deities, I would run out to milk the cows. Then I would run back. Sometimes I had to cook the Rajbhog offering because the cooks were regularly looping. They would regularly leave. Other times there was a cook here. At that time I'd run up and I'd make sandesh for the deities. And I would make burfi for the deities. Bring the milk in. Then I'd do the Rajbhog offering. I'd put the deities to sleep. Transfer all the plates. All the offerings, all the plate transfers, all the artis. The way we used to do the offerings there is we put the plate on the altar, close the doors, and then come out here and do prostrated obeisances right here on this floor and ring a bell and say the 3 prayers 3 times. Prabhupada's Vyasa-san was in the back there. So this went on for years. After the 6 o'clock offering, I would run back out and milk the cows again. I'd come back and do the 7 o'clock offering. 6 o'clock arti, I would run out, milk the cows, run back, and then there was another offering at 7 o'clock. Then Prabhupada said at New Vrindavan there should be 24-hour kirtan. He said during the day your work is your kirtan, but at night someone should always be chanting. So they had 3 shifts of 2 devotees at each shift at Bahulaban doing the kirtan. But all of them were complaining that being up so late was disturbing their work schedule. So it was decided that I would do the kirtan 3 shifts, 7 nights a week, alone. And still, that was at Bahulaban, 3 miles down the mud road, and still do all the service I was doing here. So we tried to surrender. We put the deities to rest. We walked down the road. We never had any flashlight or torch. When the moon was out, we'd see. When there was no moon, it was pitch dark. Sometimes I would fall off the road and roll down mountains. And somehow get back down to Bahulaban. Sometimes hunters used to put guns to my head, coon hunters, and threatened to kill me. Said nobody will ever know that we saw you here. Hare Krishna. Simple life. We'd get down to Bahulaban around 9:30, almost 10, quarter to 10. Walk very fast. And just chant bhajans till about 2:30 when devotees started chanting japa there. And as soon as that, I would be usually alone. Sometimes one person would be with me, but usually they didn't last. And then as soon as the first person came to start their japa, then the name was being chanted, then I would leave and walk up the hill. I'd chant my rounds, walking up that mud hill, and just get up here somehow or other by 3:30 or by 3:15. I used to be able to take bath in about 3 minutes. I'd just get up, take bath, put on clothes, put on tilak, and wake the deities by 3:30. Do the offering quarter to 4, arti at 4. And then I would sleep a few minutes at a time between offerings and artis. I would get 2 hours sleep, 2.5 hours sleep average a day in 3 different segments. That went on for some years, but it was a wonderful life. My health was terrible. I always had big boils due to neglect in my body. They gave me the name Boils Ananda Maharaj. Because my body was, for years, always covered with big boils, painful boils. But I never could see a doctor, never medicine.
How many years were you up here?
About 6 years. 5 or 6 years like that. But the mood of this place was so blissful. Even though it was so simple and so austere and there was nothing material to enjoy. The atmosphere was just so joyful. Beautiful kirtans. his classes. Classes were very intense against sense gratification. Just to keep everyone's morale. Wonderful, wonderful life. It really was. Very, very simple. There was just Krishna and the cows and the devotees. That's all we knew. And the devotees used to climb down that mountain and climb up to go to Prabhupada's palace to build it. And come back. So that went on for some years. And then Prabhupada came in 74. Prabhupada came in 76. In 76 I was already doing the all-night kirtan, so I was allowed. Then it was really difficult. I'd have to give up all sleep. Because when Prabhupada was here, he wanted me to cook sandesh for him 3 meals a day. Plus I would go to his darshans at night, in the evening for 2 hours, plus his Bhagavatam class in the morning at Vrindavan. And I'd have to run up in between to do all my deity worship. But it was so wonderful to be with Srila Prabhupada in Vrindavan. So wonderful. And because it was so much labor to go to see him, running up in the mountain 2 extra times to visit him in a day with no sleep, that when I would see him, it was ecstatic. When you do tapasya for something, Krishna reveals something much, how precious that darshan really was. It was nothing cheap. Every night at the house where Sankirtan lives now, and Prabhupada was living, he would sit out in his lawn for a couple hours, just talk to the devotees. In the morning I would go down the Agasura road for his Bhagavatam class and then come back up. And at night, in the evening, I would go down this road. And then I would get somebody else to sometimes cover for me, just when Prabhupada was here, if I needed to. I would go up and down, and every day I would go by this little rose bush, and one rose, fully blossomed, would be on that bush, right in the middle of the forest nowhere. There's no other flowers like a rose in that forest. We're all wild. This was a wild rose. I'd pluck that flower, and when I'd come up, I'd always hand that flower, and I'd place it right in Prabhupada's lotus feet. He'd sit on his vyasasana. He'd always pick it up and smell it. And sometimes when he'd give lectures, there's photos of Prabhupada giving lectures holding that rose like this. Every single day, one rose would be fully blossomed on that rose bush. It was very miraculous. Prabhupada stayed around 2 weeks. It was glorious. And I remember once they brought him into the palace. It was just a construction site. And one devotee said, Prabhupada, in the Bhagavatam it says that the palaces were lit up with jewels. Should we light up your palace with jewels? Prabhupada said, my devotees are my jewels. They will light up the world.
Haribo.
Later on, Prabhupada wanted to establish Shalagram Shila in the Western world, and he decided I should be the one to worship them. So he sent 2 Shalagram Shilas. Kolatri brought them back and put them on the altar in Vrindavan, and they were going to send them up here. But they wanted me to do all kinds of extra pujas. So I said, I'm only sleeping now 2.5 hours a day. How will I survive if I do extra pujas? So they sent up a horse and said, you ride this horse up and down, and the time it saves you from walking, you can do your puja. I never rode a horse before. And the first day was a pony. It was a lady pony named Near Mama. And the first day it galloped so fast, I could not stop her. She was just galloping, galloping, galloping. And all of a sudden there was a stream of water crossing the road. She stopped and I flew over her head and fell in the rocks. And she stomped her foot against my knee and cracked it. I was laying there with a cracked knee. And I laid on her back sideways. And she somehow brought me down. And I couldn't walk back up the road. So they made me head pujari for At Vrindavan Chandra then.
Mm-hmm.
So these are some of the experiences we had here. The devotees, brahmacharis, had very, very strong comradeship here. Because there was nothing else in the world except each other and the deities. And that association, when there's deep friendships, could actually satisfy us and maintain our desire to go on with our devotional service throughout our lives. That was one thing all the brahmacharis experienced. But the problem was, one by one, almost every brahmachari would get married. The original ashram of everyone who came, everyone got married except one other person. He was put into a gurukul somewhere as a teacher. So the mood was that whatever we have to do to serve Srila Prabhupada and please him, that was the only consideration of our life. And I'm telling you a story about myself, but actually practically every devotee in those days at Vrindavan has the same sort of story to tell. A life of complete surrender to the will of God. And it wasn't money, because Vrindavan had nothing, but the whole community was built on that spirit of sacrifice. And you see everything that was developed here, since this little farmhouse was all we had. It was all exclusively on the basis of just total sacrifice. No one was hired. Devotees who'd never hammered a nail before built those. People who never did architecture designed the temples, palace. The master plan of the palace was just written in a pencil on the back of a brown paper bag initially. And they just built it as they went along. And of course, you know the stories. At a certain time, Prabhupada was taken out of the center of the community. And ultimately everything fell apart. It was practically ruination of the whole Vrindavan project. And that for some years. But recently, Prabhupada was re-established as the Acharya of Vrindavan in practice, not just in theory. And his vision for Vrindavan has again been re-established. And now you have all come as the evidence that Prabhupada's vision will soon be fulfilled. And the lesson we learned was a major lesson, that if we keep Prabhupada's desires as the center of our lives, everything will flourish. If we place our own separate interests in the center, everything will fall to pieces. Prabhupada Prabhupada came to New Vrindavan 4 times, in either 68 or 69. The dates are not so good. Again in 72, again in 74, again in 76. But he's always living here in his instructions, because he had a very, very special purpose that New Vrindavan would achieve, that to my knowledge, he never spoke about to any other project. Other farm communities were developed in the Western world that Prabhupada really loved and wanted to see self-sufficiency, cow protection developed and flourishing. But New Vrindavan, not only did he establish cow protection for the whole society here, establish a country community at New Vrindavan, but it's the only place that he gave the order that it should be the place of pilgrimage to reveal Krishna's pastimes to the Western world. It will only happen by the unity and the spiritual empowerment of the Vaishnavas. You can see now the community's in utter debt. It's falling. It's just recovering from years of falling apart. How is it possible to make this Vrindavan, Radha Govinda temple, Radha Damodar temple, Radha Madan Mohan temple, Radha Raman temple, Radha Giridhari temple, Radha Shamsundar, Radha Gopinath, Radha Gokulananda? We can hardly take care of Radha Vrindavan Chandra. But if we just take shelter of the holy name and remain dedicated to this project against all odds, as Prabhupada empowered it before, he will empower it again, greater than ever, with many priceless lessons learned. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. The upstairs is the place. On the backside, Prabhupada had his bedroom where he would stay in 1960s when he lived here. And on the front side, he would meet devotees and he would have his table where he would write and translate. Stayed here for over a month. We'll also go to the Pujari room. It's been really renovated. It used to just be an old wood floor, now it's nice tiles. And that's where I used to sleep at night. Or at day, depending on what my schedule was. Then we'll go out to the persimmon tree that Srila Prabhupada would sit under and give his vision for New Vrindavan. The persimmon tree has fallen down, but it's still there laying in the ground. Then we'll go to the bathhouse, which has been renovated with tiles. It used to just be all cement floors. There's even a shower spigot now, which is almost sacrilegious for us old brahmacharis to see a shower spigot here. And you'll see where the stool jacket was held. Where the little shovel was kept. And if we have time, we can go down to the renovated pig pen. And we can take a walk. The brahmacharis, there was about 20 to 30 brahmacharis at a time living here in those days. And they would sleep on the upstairs, and there were some old cabins. Do you remember when we were driving up there was an old little cabin, an old little house? There's one of the old cabins that are still here that the brahmacharis used to live in. And since then they've built really nice, secure ones. But from the old days, there's still one left here, you can see. Brahmacharis would live there too. One year I remember, early, I think it was about 75, the whole ashram was infested with poisonous snakes. There were these copperheads. There were dozens of them everywhere. And one devotee used to somehow do something with them with a shovel. They were just everywhere. Devotees just in the pitch dark just go out walking from the cabins to here. No one ever got hurt. We used to take care of the cows here. We personally help pull the calves out of their bodies when they would give birth. They used to send a bull up here, and we used to have to personally arrange. I don't know why a brahmachari had to do that, but I had to introduce the cow to the bull. Somehow or other create an atmosphere where they would give calves so that there would be milk. I would never watch though. I would always turn my head. So this is a very, very brief summary of life at Vrindavan. And the Agasura Road, someday, I haven't walked that road. It would be a challenge to even find it. No one has walked that road in about 20 years. Since Marsada Maharaj has built this new, very nice superhighway going across. But someday I really want to find that road and walk it. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
The highest standard is you're supposed to take that before. Very, very high standard. So I break the ice and then this little path. I just run as fast as I could.
Can you ask everybody to come fast?
Careful. You respond to nature's calls. You have to go about maybe 10 yards down. This kitchen is where I would always make sandesh for Srila Prabhupada. He liked it very much. Whenever anybody from New Vrindavan would visit him, he would always request that I make sandesh to deliver to him. India, London, America. Many, many times for him.
This is what you used?
Just like this. Just wood in here. It's a new floor. It used to just be a stone floor. This is where the barrel would be to take bath. Should I show you where the stool jacket hung? Yes, famous photos. Yes. Yeah. Oh yeah. Down there, you want to go there?
Yeah, let me just see. Maybe
It's all renovated now. They actually put a marble floor there.
this way.
This is a very beautiful view. This was just built in recent years. Very, very nice. Early days. This was opulent. There's like 3 of them. What?
It's not opulent anymore.
Anyone wants to? Yes.
Bridge of Blessing Spirit.
There was a cabin right a little down here, just like that one. That one way down there. And that's where the Blessing Spirits were written and edited and everything.
Oh, right. Those magazines,
The real old ones.
Right,
Not the
right.
colorful ones, but
Right.
the very early ones.
Right.
One devotee named Damodar Pandit, the Brahmacharya, lived right here. This little forest here. Tiny little cabin.
Bottom
When he went to India to meet Prabhupada, he said, don't anyone cut down these oak trees. It's a beautiful forest.